Welcome to the treatment room. How are
Hi,
you
Phil.
today, Andy?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Despite the weather?
Yeah, wet and cold up in
Yeah,
the
we're
north.
always optimistic though, aren't we, in Lancashire about the weather, even when it's miserable, because, you know, that's our kind of a norm. So we just smile when it rains and we're absolutely exhilarated when the sun comes out.
Phil, when you have a Labrador, you've got no choice but to embrace all weathers, don't you? So
That's very true. Yeah, and there's the old adage, isn't there? There's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing.
Correct.
So
Yes,
we're going to have the right kit. And
good
let's
excuse
face
to keep buying new kit to keep me warm.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah.
No,
You can never have enough wet weather kit, I find.
Of course. No. That's it. No, really
Anyway,
good. Having a good week. Really
good.
Exciting. So
me too.
Looking forward to sharing some more insights today.
Some topical information, as well as a bit of a push for our webinar series at the end. So if you're not sure about what's going on there, then listen in and we'll tell you a bit more as we go. Certainly. So I think with the usual, we're going to talk about three things, I think, Andy, today. The first is around about thinking about your organization, whether you're big or you're small, and what happens if you lose a member of your team, or a member of your team goes missing for a while, maybe they're sickness or on maternity. We're going to think about supervision, the importance of supervision, but also the impact it can have on the business. And then finally, we're going to just think about marketing, aren't we? And thinking about how we target our communications in terms of the client base we're trying to attract.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, no, three really good topics to get delved into.
Yeah, and they've come out of conversations that we've had in the last couple of weeks.
And that's the thing.
They're real ones.
They're real ones, and I think that's something we need to keep pointing out and highlighting, that, you know, all of the topics that we highlight in our, like, these short hot topic kind of podcasts are all real scenarios that we get on a weekly basis, and that's why we're trying to kind of share some insights over what we do and how we help others, but also how you guys can kind of prevent getting into some of these situations, or again, just be looking at things differently in your own businesses and organizations. We see ourselves as one of our mutual mentors once said to us, you know, we see our role is to keep shining the torch on different areas of the business that you might not be considering. So, and hopefully We've got three more areas to shine it on today. Yeah. So shall we crack on with the first one, which is thinking about, well, initially it came about thinking about cover, but actually I think we've expanded it to think about, so if I kind of set a brief little scenario up. So you've got a full establishment, I would call it. So you've got a bunch of people working for you. You've got no vacancies. You're doing pretty well. Order book's looking quite good. You've got loads of people coming in and out of the business, and everything's fine. But from a risk management point of view, are you actually thinking about what happens if any one of your team members went missing for any reason? And maybe that's where we start to open up the conversation, Andy, because we're often think, wow, it's a blessing, I've just got everybody in place, and then something happens. All of a sudden, no, now we start again. And I think it is. I think it's a really valid topic to be shining light on for several reasons, and you know, we could probably talk half an hour on this topic alone. So to try and get through it in a short amount of time is going to be challenging, especially for me, who likes to expand on things. The overall, if we start with the conclusion, I think if you're a business and that you have got a team, or you're starting to build a team, it's always thinking about what if. So the considerations that you need to take, you know, what's your contingency plans? What's your plans B if something goes off? You know, like you've said there's, you know, in the opening thing, people might be going off on maternity. So what's the plan? Now, obviously, in that incident, you would hope that there's enough dialogue and conversation that you know that's coming. So you've got time to plan and put contingencies in place. And that's fair enough. But there's also instances that, you know, if we were to stereotype a lot of therapists, and this is okay, you would argue a lot of therapists are quite active. And where we're active, then injuries occur, don't they? Yeah, absolutely. Only in my own organization, and I do hope he's listening to this particular one. You know, my business partner, broke his leg. You know, it wasn't his fault. There's nothing he can do. It's just it's one of those instances. But it does change the dynamics of your organization. And I think that's, you know, personally for me, I ruptured my Achilles. I was actually outside of work for over 4 months. So things happen, don't they? And I think that's the reality.
And I think that the impact is differential, isn't it? Because if it's somebody who's at the front line of the business, so it's a therapist, then actually you've got an existing customer base.
Yeah.
You might have commitments that need to be covered. So that's scenario one. Now, you could be in a situation where you've got more than one clinician working for you, in which case you've probably got a bit of an option to juggle. If you're the business owner and you've stepped back a bit, you might have to step forward and get your sleeves rolled up to cover in the short term. So those are the kind of ways you'd manage the risk, as an example. But let's imagine it's somebody who is a receptionist or your office manager or somebody who does your finances, and for whatever reason they go missing. Then the immediate impact will depend upon the circumstance. So if it's your front of house staff and suddenly on a Monday morning there's nobody there to answer the phone, to book appointments, to welcome people in, you've got an acute issue.
Yeah.
If it's your accountant or a bookkeeper, then actually you've got a bit more of a contingency to work out what happens next. But if you're not billing, if you're not recovering, then obviously your cash flow is going to impact. So these are all the kind of things that we probably don't think about, that we just need to have in the back of our mind. What is our plan B?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's really important, and I know everyone focuses on growing, and I know everyone focuses on trying to get more customers in, and how do we get more customers? How do we keep staff happy? And how do we look at, but also it's having the time to, and hopefully listening to this, that if this is you and you're listening, going, oh God, I don't have a plan B, then, you pause this, and the first thing you do is go and block some time out in your diary now to go, okay, what would we do in this situation? And let's hope, look, we're all hoping that you never have to use plan B. That's plan A, right? That we never have to go to plan B. But knowing you've got plan B there and you've got a plan, I think always is helpful and reassuring, because, we've both been in business and dealing with businesses for an awful long time now. And we can guarantee that, in most cases, nothing always goes to plan. I think that's a fair kind of overall assumption. So it's being aware, and again, I'll come back to a bit like the presentation I recently did with some undergraduates, is therapists. If you're a therapist listening to this, you're natural problem solvers anyway. You're naturally good at finding a plan B. You're naturally good at going, all right, okay, that's not going to plan, or oh, this has happened, let's go and do this. So it's not like you have to sit down and panic about, oh my God, I've got to learn some skills of how to, project manage things differently, or how to put the contingency plans in and spend the next 5 days Googling contingency plans. You're good at this already. So just apply the knowledge base you've got in just a different format.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what's interesting, just thinking about when I was listening to you there, I was just thinking about the presentation, one of the presentations we did at Therapy Live Business, where actually I ran a little poll, and most people in that presentation admitted to winging it. And I guess in a smaller organization, we rely upon our colleagues to do such a broad range of work, and we often don't know what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, and we don't write this down typically in terms of an operating process, or even keep the passwords in the safe or whatever it is, as a just in case, and then something happens and we think, oh, we had no idea how people do things or how we've expanded or changed processes. So that's the other component, I guess. You could be flying along with a full complement, thinking about plan B, but then also think, okay, so if Mary goes missing, I can step in and do Mary's job. But the only problem is I haven't got a clue how Mary does it, and how to get into the system, and how to follow through. So you've almost got a kind of a double edge to that. There's one is what's your plan B, and then the other is, if you have got a plan B, can somebody pick it up and run with it, so that they could do that job with some level of competence and confidence. And if they can't, clearly there's a development need and some business process activity there just to kind of log in some way or buddy up and share, so that you've got no single point of failure, as I would think about it, in within your organization.
I think it also happens if you're a sole owner and leader. What happens if something does happen to you? What happens if you get injured? What happens if you have to go for, some surgery or something? What then happens? And I think that's the other thing to consider, is that, we don't all want things to happen to us, but things could happen to us. It might even be your team. It might, and I was thinking about you and the passwords. How many owners, I've got all the passwords for everything all saved up I've got them all, but then what happens if someone happens to you? How does that business continue to run?
Yeah. Obviously being mindful of data protection and GDPR and safe management of data and passwords, which is a separate issue, which I'm sure our colleagues in HCPG would give some advice on. I guess that moves us on then, Andy, because the bottom line, I think, today is probably about cash flow and profitability. Because if we haven't got a plan B, then we've got a risk. And that moved us on to a conversation we were having about supervision. Now, supervision, obviously, for me, as an outsider to the industry, comes in two phases. The first bit would be the clinical supervision, and then the second element would be supervisory management. So sitting down with people to see how they're doing and how they are performing within the organization. And in some instances, those two events would go together. But I guess the question is, where is that supervision undertaken? And that was a challenge that we met in a conversation recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's a real fine balance, isn't it, in small organizations, that you want to be spending time, especially in a therapy organization where you only get paid when you're seeing somebody. If that makes sense. If you're in another organization where you're sat in the office all day and you can sell products via a website, then it's no problem because you can take hours out. Whereas in our world, if you're taking a senior clinician out for an hour to do training with somebody else for an hour, well, actually that's 2 hours of lost revenue.
Yeah.
And I wonder, my initial question is to most of them, how many people you budget for that? How many people forecast for that? Because that time over is a lot of time, and there's two reasons why I think it's important that we focus on this. One, you have to do it, the supervision, because I think as an organization, we should always be spending time training our team. I think that's it. I think you can get it across. And I think your point also about how well people are doing and how well are performing for as a leader or senior leadership team, I think that's also important for you to keep looking at. But it's finding the balance, isn't it? And it's finding
Absolutely.
and I think that's you don't want to have a really, really awesome team, all really well educated, all really happy, but actually at the end of the month go, there's no money, guys, to pay you all, so, and it happens, Phil, doesn't it? It happens.
It does. Yeah. And I think just to add to your economic argument there, I mean, we're very much pro supervision, both at a clinical level and an operational level. I think one of the double ironies there, you're talking about the time that's lost between the two people having the conversation. The other question is, where are you having the conversation? Because actually, if you're tying up an active room within your business, then actually you're also stopping a third level of revenue, which is if you're tying up a treatment room with a conversation that's non-fee earning, then actually you multiply that by at least 3. So actually think about where you're having some of these conversations and the time at which you're having them. Because if it's a quiet time in the diary normally, and there's a vacant slot, then you're not losing the revenue from that slot. But if you're doing it at peak time on a peak day and you're taking up a room, then that's an expensive use of space.
Especially if you've got a large team. If you've got a large team, then there could be an awful lot of time in that clue. So I guess the other thing to do, is there a way that you can be a little bit more innovative? Is there a little bit more way that you can, find group training or, bit of studying beforehand and send short discussions afterwards? So there's lots of different ways that potentially that could be done. But it's just our idea of today is just, just have a look at it and consider it and see, is there ways that you can do things better to increase the profitability while still delivering excellent clinical supervision?
And your point about forecasting really important, because if you're not forecasting for it, then it's going to be only an unexpected dent in your income. If you are forecasting for it, that's good news. But then where are you doing it, and does that have a secondary impact?
No, I agree.
Yeah, and the third and final area, we just want to dip into this one briefly, don't we, around kind of marketing communication, marketing messages. And we have had a few conversations recently about how you reach the audience that you're after. And I guess one of the telling questions we ask is, so who are you trying to communicate with? And that was quite an interesting conversation in the end, wasn't it? So for me, the principle was around, you have to, it's a bit classic, but it's walking in their shoes, isn't it? So think about, if you're thinking about tackling triathletes or runners, then you have to talk in the language and think in the in the persona of that individual, don't you?
I think that's and I think 100%, and that's why marketing people, good marketing people are really good, aren't they? Because they've got that skill, because they think like that constantly. And I think as therapists, sometimes we do have our therapy heads on, and we use terminology that's they're really familiar with us, and and actually those things might not be the language or the terminology that the ideal customer would use. So,
and I think I just to build on that, Andy, I think sometimes the interesting thing is you may be trying to get to your customer indirectly. So you may have to talk to another healthcare professional, for example, maybe a GP, actually, to get access to their patients so that you can pick them up as customers. So you're not talking to the person you're trying to pick up as your end customer. You're actually talking in the language of a GP to encourage the GP to think, in this instance, it would be great, you would be a great this would be a great relationship and you could help me. Whereas if you're talking to the end user and you're projecting that to the GP, you won't necessarily get the same kind of return as you might do if you think in the shoes of a GP.
Yeah, no, it's an absolutely fantastic point, Phil. And it reminds me of a conversation I had recently where we were looking at marketing strategy, and we're having a conversation. And I said, look, in my opinion, you've got 4 different streams of what you're trying to do, but they're 4 different customer types, 4 different customer messages, and 4 different strategies. So you can't use one. So, and like you said, the words and the terminology that you probably use for each different one would be different.
Yeah.
Because you're targeting them in their own world, in their shoes. And I think, and that can be, again, quite daunting, quite time consuming and stuff, but it's going to be less time consuming than you sitting there looking at your marketing going, why has that not worked? So I think it's certainly a really valid point that we felt that we need to highlight today, was the fact that,
absolutely,
just take some time before you write any content or you put any post out there or you're spending any time marketing. Just take that minute to go, okay, who is going to read this? Who am I targeting at? And do we think that the language of this is something that they would use? And if so, press go and see what happens. If not, then you might need to take some time to reword it.
Brilliant. Okay, Andy, so we've had a quick canter, haven't we? We thought about, have you got a plan B?
Yeah.
In case anything happens within your organization, and what do you need in terms of process? We've thought about the importance of supervision. Are you accounting for it? Are you forecasting for it? And what's the impacts of where you're actually conducting your supervision? And then thinking about marketing and thinking about walking in the shoes of the individual that we're seeking to gain the attention of, which might not be directly the customers that we're actually pursuing. So a bit of food for thought there. Hope everybody's enjoyed that. If you want to send us any information, send us a challenge, or send us something to talk about, then do drop us a line on social media. Take a look at the Academy Light site, elevateyourclinic.com/light. And otherwise, I think, Andy, just a quick
Ryan,
promo about the
webinars,
the webinar series.
Yeah. So you'll see in the notes of the podcast that below that we've got so make sure you're following our event, right? Link of where we're doing webinars monthly and got some really up and coming great webinars all the time. We're going to be getting people. So please do make sure you're following that so you don't miss out. And like Phil said, if you're listening to this through your podcasts, then you can also catch us on video if you'd like to go and see our faces on the elevateyourclinic.com/light page. So thanks again once for listening, and speak to you soon.
Take care, Andy. Speak soon.